was a homecoming for me. I went here 100 million years ago. And I barely recognized anything as I walked from the parking lot to here. It has changed so much. When I went to Kennesaw, it was 13,000 students, and it was considered massive back in the day. So it's wonderful to have you all here. I remember being a student here and going to every talk and listening to everybody and just wondering what my world would be. So it's pretty surreal to be back here as the speaker, sharing my story. And I really hope that my story inspires you. So I was born in Cameroon in a small town called, at the time it was called Victoria. Cameroon is in Central Africa. I was born about 17 years after Cameroon became independent. So it was called Victoria at the time. It's called Limbe now. So I grew up in Cameroon with a pretty middle class background, even though my private school had a dirt floor, my first school, but it was a private school. It was much better than the public schools were back then. And I was a really good student. I loved education and I loved learning, and I was very smart. It's taken me 40 years to be able to say I was very smart, and still am. So when I was about 10 years old, I skipped my last year of elementary school and I went on to middle school. Now, Cameroon's education system is 7 years elementary, 5 years middle, 2 years high school. I was 10 when I went off to boarding school. Loved my middle school experience, excelled there, and then went on to high school. In the middle of my first year of high school, my mother showed up at school one day and said, "Hey, you're going to the U.S." And I thought, what? So there are a lot of surprises in my life, as you can tell. Unbeknownst to me, my parents had been cooking up this plan for me to come to the U.S. and go to college. Now, the backstory there is that my father, who is the history professor and was a college professor all of his career, had gotten a number of jobs in the U.S., but had ended up here at Kennesaw State teaching history. So the plan was that as I came of that age, 16 was early, but my parents thought I was ready for it. So my mother packed me up and put me on a plane. And I took a Lufthansa flight from Douala, Cameroon, and landed in Atlanta on June 13th, 1993. I loved my experience at Kennesaw. It was so formative, so influential in my life, such a great foundation for the career that I have gone on to have. This whole world had just opened up for me, this little girl from Africa. I was very, very curious. I wanted to be involved in everything that I possibly could. It was just an amazing, amazing 4 years for me. I want to tell you a story about 3 things that happened at Kennesaw that really stayed with me, that were important lessons. The first was that, my undergraduate degree was in international relations. And as part of that program, I was required to do foreign language study. So as part of that, my foreign language, there were 2 African languages that were offered at the time, and they were pretty random. One of them was Twi, which is a language that is predominantly spoken in Ghana. And then the second language was Swahili. And so I had a choice between those 2, and my 16, 17, 18-year-old self thought, I'll study Swahili. The chances I'll ever go to Ghana or live in Ghana are pretty slim to none. Now, I didn't know that 20 years later I would be living in Ghana, but life doesn't make sense looking forward, only looking backwards. So I did 2 years of Swahili study, and that was really important. I'll tell you why in a minute. Second thing that happened while I was here, I had a mentor who was a professor in the languages department, Dr. Rosa Bovia, who's now retired, taught French in the African language, in the language department. And she was a colleague of my father, so a family friend. She really took me under her wing. I was this little girl who had shown up, living with my father and my 2 brothers. My father sort of didn't know what to do with me. And so for a while I lived with her. And she just became like this mother figure for me. And so one day I had just found out that I would not be able to do some study abroad program that required travel that I had gotten really excited about, because that was before I got my green card and I wasn't able to leave and re-enter the country at will. So I had just found that I couldn't go, and I was devastated. I said, what if I never get to see the world? What if this was my only chance? And she leaned back in her chair and laughed and laughed and laughed. And I thought, why are you laughing? I just poured my heart out to you and lamented my grief to you. And when she was done giggling at my self-pity, she leaned forward and she said, Mayang. She calls me by my middle name. And she says, you are going to get to see the whole world. You're going to see every corner of it. You just don't know that yet. And I remember looking at her like, how do you even know that? But she was right. I mean, now 30 years later, 70 plus countries, almost 80. There's not a moment that I get on an airplane going somewhere that I don't think Auntie Rosa predicted this moment for me. And so I'm still in touch with her. We talk often. But that was just a testament to the fact that sometimes the people around you, especially your professors, will foresee a future for yourself that you just can't possibly envision just because you don't have that view on the world. So that was the second notable thing that happened. The last was that in my junior year, I got an opportunity to go do an internship at the Carter Center, the Carter Presidential Center downtown, not far from where I live now. So I applied and I got an internship at the Africa governance program in the Carter Center. And I remember my very first day, I was wearing a nice red blazer that I thought felt very powerful. And I get to the Carter Center and I went to the program and to the office where I had been directed to go to. And as soon as I get there, I see all of the staff are coming out of a meeting. And in that meeting, they had all just been told that the program had ran out of funding and everybody was being sent home. And that was one of my first lessons about working in nonprofits, because I knew at the time that that's what I wanted to do, which is the reality that if funding is not being raised and it's not available or it runs out, that's the end of the story. And so learning about the importance of fundraising, and now that I'm a fundraiser with many years of experience, was one of the most critical things that I learned from that experience. So my job over the course of the program, because the program, everybody did go home except for the program director. So I stayed on. I was helping archive everything, put everything together, store it, and make sure, we close the program with a nice, neat bow on it. So I learned a lot in that experience. That was the first lesson from the Carter Center. The second lesson was on a couple of occasions, I got to sit in on meetings with President Carter. May he rest in peace. And that was an amazing experience in leadership. Those were some of the first real lessons in leadership that I remember picking up the pearls off and putting in my pocket. President Carter was an amazing leader, whenever you think of his politics or his presidency. And I remember on both occasions how very intent of a listener he was. He leaned forward in his seat. He really hung on to every word that everybody was saying. And he was really keen on learning. And he was often the last person to speak. And up until that time, especially having grown up in Cameroon, where my experience of leaders, especially presidential leaders, we have a president who's been there for almost 50 years now. He's 92 and just won his 7th re-election campaign. Oldest living president in the world in Cameroon. So, watching a different definition of leadership really stayed with me. And those are lessons that I have carried throughout my career and to this day in how I try to lead. So those were my Kennesaw experiences. When I left Kennesaw in 1997, I had my degree in international relations, and I thought I was done with my education. I was ready to be done and go into the world of work and start my job. But my father is an academic, and a bachelor's degree was just not enough for him. So I went on to do my master's degree at Yale University. And one of the things that was an advantage to me was that as part of that program, I had to do an African language as well. And I had, at that point now, had 2 years of Swahili studies at Kennesaw State. So I was already well ahead of myself and the rest of my class. So that was wonderful. As I was wrapping up my time at Yale, I got a Fulbright scholarship to go do an intensive Swahili course in Zanzibar. And I was really excited about that. And that was the beginning of that prediction that Dr. Bobia had for me, that I would go on to see the world. At that point, I'd only been to Cameroon and lived in the U.S. And so that was really my first time outside of the 2 countries that I'd lived in to go see the world. And so off I went to Zanzibar in the summer of 1999. These dates sound so far long ago. 1999, with a group of other students from all over the country. And so we went and we did this immersive course. We got to live with families in Zanzibar. I went thinking, okay, they speak English and sometimes they speak Swahili. That was not the case. Everybody only spoke Swahili. So we really had to immerse ourselves and learn. And so I did a whole summer Swahili study at the Institute for Swahili and Foreign Languages in Zanzibar and loved it. When I came back from that program, there was a startup organization that was a nonprofit. It was internet-based. This was in the years when the internet was a baby. Infancy of the internet. It was called Global Learn. It no longer exists. But what they did was create and gather content and put it on a website that students around the U.S. could use to learn about the world. And we were basically content creators before that was a thing. And so off we went. They sent us on a 12-week expedition. We were called explorers. They sent us on a 12-week expedition to South Africa. So we got to live and travel all over South Africa. And there I was seeing the world and writing about it and meeting with all kinds of people. And, it was a dream job. I came back to the U.S. I came back to Atlanta. And I was ready to start my real career in nonprofits. I got hired as an admin assistant for Heifer International, which is a large international organization that works in agriculture. So I started that job, did it for 2 years, got transferred to Little Rock, Arkansas with a promotion. Every time I tried to leave, I got promoted. I got promoted. And by the end of 15 years, my last role there was as vice president for the Africa program, which was about a 13-country portfolio, $40 million budget to manage 300 staff in Africa. And I did that job and loved it. But my life was changing at the time. I had gotten married. I had 2 children. So I took the job in Ghana, had to learn Twi, which I haven't done successfully, but took the job as CEO for Junior Achievement Africa. So from 2015 to 2020, I did that job. In my role, I sat on the global board of Junior Achievement, and the global board met all over the world. So I was in Hong Kong, I was in Qatar, I was in Spain, we had these meetings all over the world, and I was almost never in Africa. And I thought, this did not work out the way I planned. So when I left that role in the pandemic, after 5 years, I thought, I'm just going to go back to Atlanta. I want a small job that doesn't require me to be on a plane. I want to be home. I want to be within the 10-mile radius of my grocery store, my kids' school, my work. And I just want to be in one place. And so, lo and behold, the job that I did in my most recent chapter, a Global Village project, allowed me to do all of those things. It was a school for refugee girls in Decatur, not far from where my first job at Heifer had been, literally a couple of blocks down the street. So it was a full circle moment. And I, in this past role, have gotten to be in the classroom and be in a school with refugee girls coming into the U.S. as teenagers who had had no education at all and who were starting their education from scratch and trying to get ready to be successful in the U.S. school system. So it kind of took me full circle because I knew their story. I knew what it was like to be a teenage girl coming to the U.S. I knew what it was like to be a minority in the education system. There were all these parallels between my life and theirs, even though I had not been a refugee. And so in the last 5 years, I've done that job. I have loved every moment. And I recently left it in July, and I am taking a hiatus, waiting for my next chapter. And hopefully it will show up soon. So what have I learned? Number 1, know your why. Being grounded in your sense of purpose will sustain you in the long term. If you're doing work that does not have meaning to you, you're not going to be able to sustain it. Number 2, don't plan your career and your life so much that there's no room for luck or serendipity. So many things that came up to me in my career were really about luck, and people are thinking about you, and doors will open, which leads me to number 3. Be prepared to walk through whatever door opens. Luck does favor the prepared. And accept it when doors close. They are guiding you to the right ones. Number 4, very important, establish your reputation early. Most of the decisions that will be made in your career, like whether or not you get the job and whether or not you get the promotion, will be made without you in the room. Number 5, your skill will take you far, but your character will take you farther. Don't step over others on your way to success. Number 6, know when it's time to leave a place, even if you don't know where you're going next. The two are not necessarily related. I have never left a job knowing where I'm going. So number 7, understand how money works and know how to make it work for you. Master the disciplines of earning, saving, spending, and investing. Number 8, lots of people will tell you never give up. In my experience, sometimes you have to give up. It's bad advice. If you're pushing against the wall, that will not move. Your energy is finite. Stop doing that. Number 9, embrace your ignorance. You'll find many times in your career that there are things you don't know, and even in your life, and that's okay. Just be like, I don't know it. Invest in the knowing, grow from it, and finally, if you're called to lead, answer the call. And I just want to say this because not many people talk about followers. It's okay to be a follower. There's nothing wrong with it. But what I will charge you to do is to be an intelligent follower, an informed follower, and never to follow a leader blindly. Thank you all for listening and for being here this morning.
What kind of things you recommend them to start when they are at college? What kinds of experiences do you think prepared you for this amazing journey that you had?
Talk to people you don't know, because when you do that, you're building your conversation skills. Go to things you're not interested in, because how else are you going to know that you're not interested in? I remember my very first class was a math class, and we went around introducing ourselves, and I told you I was 16 years old. The woman sitting next to me was 72, and she was coming back to school to do her degree. And I remember being like, oh my gosh, and I could have gone the route of being intimidated, and I was. But I thought, I'm going to talk to this woman. She's as old as my grandmother. That's pretty incredible. So it's really opening yourself up to the opportunities around you.
For those of our students who are interested in global nonprofit kind of things, are there any areas that you want them to specifically focus on, or do you think nonprofit world is not much different regardless?
The nonprofit world, there's so much need in the world. All sectors, right? And there's so many challenges in our world. So I think for me, the thing that was useful was just seek to serve and seek to lead. And the opportunities and the need will present itself, and the need is enormous, and the need is everywhere. So open yourself up to it. I always tell young people that I mentor, especially when you're talking in the job context, turn down an offer, not an opportunity. Even if the opportunity seems unlikely, explore it. Open yourself up to there's need all over, and you can serve in all kinds of ways. And it's not just for the nonprofit world. I think you all pick your majors and the careers you intend because you feel a connection to that thing. The thing that you feel most passionate about and most problematic about the world is really where you should put your energy.
And the goal of this event is really to showcase our students how majors in humanities and social sciences prepare them for a purposeful life. I don't know if you can also talk briefly about majoring in one of the, I will be broad here, majoring in one of the humanities and social sciences can differentiate you in the market, the kind of things that you want to do, or maybe not.
I think we should be investing in people. That's who we are. And that will always be the most important thing. So I'm a big fan and proponent of, firstly, follow the thing that your heart leads you to, but don't let the world tell you there's no future in the humanities. My biggest challenge is, so I'm still Cameroonian. I never became a U.S. citizen. I suffered from imposter syndrome for a lot of time because I started and finished my academic career so often. I was very often the youngest person in the room, and it took me years to really be comfortable with that. But yeah, those were most of the things were in my head, and I really had to get over that. I remember being at a conference in Doha, probably about 6 years ago, and we were going around, and the challenge, the prompt was to say something positive about yourself, braggy about yourself. And I was about 40 years old then, and that was the first time I was able to say, I am a really smart person. It had frightened me all of my life to say I was a smart, even though everybody around me was like, you're very smart. But I said that out loud. So it's those kinds of things, right? And so, I think the work of life is getting to learn yourself and be comfortable with who you are. And sometimes that happens only after other people have been comfortable with who you are and reflect you back to yourself. It was a great experience. But, the name recognition was great. The educational experience was great. But for me, a lot of what I give credit to was really my Kennesaw experience. It was so much more formative. Graduate school is a different learning experience. It's very much of it is self-driven and by design. And I think I really needed more what I got from college, from here, because I was young and because all of it was so new. I was trying to navigate a new environment. I was trying to learn myself and all of that. So yes, I give credit to Yale, and I give a lot of credit to this experience. I don't know that I can decouple the two. Love a question about failure. So I failed a lot. I feel like a lot of times I had a strategy to sabotage myself. So I'm going to tell this story, and then I'll be embarrassed later. When I started my first semester freshman year, so I told you I had come to the U.S. very unexpectedly. All my friends were still in high school back home, and I wanted to be with my friends back home. So the day my mother took me to the airport and shook my hand and put me on the plane, and I always wondered why my mother shook my hand instead of hugging me. And I only realized that when I became a mother, and I was like, oh, if she'd hugged me, she probably would not have let go. She was putting her 16-year-old child on a Lufthansa flight. But she said to me, go try this out. If it doesn't work out, you can always come home. And I took that idea and I ran with it. And I thought, I'm going to flunk my first semester at Kennesaw State. And I did. I sat at home and I watched The Young and the Restless all semester. And at the end of the semester, I had a 1.67 GPA. And my mother called me and she was like, what the heck are you doing? And apparently that was not a real offer. She was like, you need to get it together and you need to pull yourself out of this place and you need to do well because you're staying in college. And I thought, oh, okay. So I did. I pulled myself together. I stopped failing because I knew she knew I was smart and that something was wrong if I was failing. So that was one of the main failures was I started out my college career sabotaging myself. But yeah, no, failures are so essential. I think we all think of failures as something we should hide. Nobody grows from success as much as they grow from failure. So I am learning to embrace all my failures. If you're an international student, you're already ahead because if you have crossed a border in this world, you've seen more of the world than most people get to. So already, don't discount your experience or coming to the US and whatever challenges you face adapting to a new culture and a new environment as a big challenge. Tap into what you already know, tap into your experiences, tap into your knowledge of different cultures because so much of the world is global now. And learn a language. I don't think it matters as much what language you learn. I think what's impressive and useful is that by learning a language, you expand your mind. And by speaking a language, you show that you have a capacity to learn. I think as an international student, if you can, first with the languages, with the cultural competency and the ability to move between different cultures, and then whatever major or area of study you add on top of that is just, icing on the cake. But you bring so much to the experience, you bring so much to enrich your colleagues and your classmates. And just, I think, build on what you have and just continue to grow from there. Maybe I should have stayed longer in college and learned more. I was so in a hurry to finish and to get my degree. And there was no need to do that. But I think what I would advise is, take your time. And really embrace everything that college has to offer. That was my regret was being in a hurry. I was in a hurry to start my life and I didn't realize college was already life starting. I would say that the complement between the travel and the education was that the education gave me a foundation, especially in international education, of most of the world. I had a sense of the history, I had a sense of the culture, I had a sense of, but I wasn't so tied to it that I couldn't see what's in front of me. I know people who've traveled to many countries and have many passports, stamps in their passports, and haven't really grown from the experience because they couldn't divorce themselves from whatever preconceptions they had going to that place. For me, I think it's good to have your education as a foundation, but have a loose grip on it and allow travel to really inform it because it's that human connection, it's that being in the place and being in the context of seeing it with your own eyes and having your own experiences that really forms you. I would advise you and I would caution you to manage your energy very carefully because especially social change work is a marathon. It is not a sprint. You have to really pace yourself in order to have a career that is successful and sustainable. And you can't get burned out early on. So don't try to save the world. Try to save, do your part, but certainly don't take it all on. It's a group effort. The job of saving the world is definitely a group effort. Don't go into it thinking you can do it alone. You'll burn out, and the world needs you to be strong for the work that we need to do. I think fundamentally it's really being a purposeful traveler is about not being a scheduled traveler. You can have some set of what you're going to do, but really just being unscheduled and opening yourself up and putting yourself in the places where normal everyday people go. Once a year I try to take a solo trip and I just go and I don't really have an agenda except I'm going to just talk to people. And I remember being in Morocco and being in the cabin with this family. And by the end of our conversation, we were best friends. And they were like, come have dinner. Mom wants to cook you, whatever. So it's really about being that and making those human connections, because I think that's the real world. The real world doesn't really happen. Conference rooms are important, but that's not that's not where purposeful traveling. If you're really going with the intention to learn, and to have the world open up to you, you have to open yourself up to it. We learn to live by living. That's the only way you learn to live. And part of the human experience and living is making mistakes, trying things that you're uncomfortable with. I can't say that I'm the most confident on the stage now, but I'm here. Going outside of your comfort zone. And I think that those were some of the things. Is just, you try new things, you put yourself in uncomfortable situations. You don't become a public speaker by being an excellent public speaker. You start becoming a public speaker by being a pretty crappy one. And then you get better and you reflect and you stay up at night and overthink the thing that you said or should have said or didn't say. And then you fix it for the next time. So living life, learning from life is like tooling a plane while it's in the air. You just have to, you'll never completely find yourself in a comfortable place. And you have to just keep pushing beyond that sense of self-doubt or sense of unfamiliarity, and doing the thing that's uncomfortable.
I'm assuming most of the people in this room are global. So what type of challenges did you face? And how did you handle them?
I have been most of my career the only person that looks like me in the room. And there have been challenges and there have been rewards, because rooms need people who look like me. I am not a minority. Especially in Africa, I shouldn't be a minority. One of the most enduring leadership lessons that I carry around with me came from an experience I had in Sierra Leone. So when I was vice president for Africa programs, one of my colleagues, I had hired him out of Sierra Leone. He was the regional director for West Africa. He took the role that I had moved into. I am so sorry. I'm so embarrassed. His name is Rashid Sissay. He and I are still good friends to this day. He's currently the Sierra Leone ambassador to the United Arab Emirates. Anyway, Rashid and I were traveling throughout Sierra Leone. We were in villages, rural villages with women, mostly women's groups, sitting on the floor under the tree, on the ground, on the mat, talking to women about their challenges, their experiences, what their lives were like, and so on and so forth. One of the things that I kept noticing that Rashid did was everywhere we went, he introduced me. He said several things about me, but he introduced me as his boss. Now, the context of this is Rashid is a very big guy. He comes from the Madingo tribe of people in Sierra Leone, very big people. And here I was, I always feel like a little shorty next to him. And we had traveled together, and he'd done this in every group that we went to. And at the end of the day, as we got in the car to leave, I turned to him and I said, Rashid, you don't have to tell everybody that I'm your boss. Like, you can cut that out. And Rashid, who loves me and has great respect for me, he sort of scolded me, and I needed to hear it. He said, I am doing that on purpose. I'm not just telling them you're my boss because you're my boss. I'm telling them because it's important that they see that it is possible for a man like me, big as I am, to have a boss who is a woman like you and who looks like them. So that was one of the first things that happened on earlier in my career that really allowed me and empowered me to embrace my leadership as a woman, as an African woman, and as a person who is in spaces where people don't often look like her.
Thank you very much. It was a great conversation.